Sonia was 17, a high school senior with plans for college. She was bright, well-liked, and on the outside, just another teenager trying to navigate life. She had a close group of friends, teachers who praised her potential, and parents who believed she was on the right path. But beneath that familiar routine, something was happening. Something that no one, not her classmates, not the school administrators, not even the people closest to her, could see coming. It started with whispers, a teacher seen speaking to her a little too closely after class, a text message, quickly deleted before anyone could notice, a meeting behind a locked door that lasted just a little too long. At first, no one thought much of it. She was a good student. Teachers liked her. Maybe she was getting extra help. Maybe she was being mentored. But the signs were there, hidden in plain sight. 3 men, respected, trusted, seen as role models in the school. They had families, careers, reputations. They stood in front of students every day, teaching lessons about history, literature, science, and yet, after hours when the halls were quiet and the classrooms empty, there were meetings that should have never taken place, conversations that should have never happened, lines that should have never been crossed. Sonia never spoke about it, not at first, not to her friends, not to a counselor, not even in the pages of her journal. But something changed. The bright, hopeful girl who once stayed late to work on extra credit assignments stopped raising her hand in class. She moved through the hallways differently, head down, shoulders tense. Some noticed the change, but no one asked. No one ever does until it's too late. But before we go on, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe for more chilling, true crime stories like this. What happened next wasn't an accident. It wasn't a moment of weakness or a sudden lapse in judgment. It was planned, carefully, quietly. It was a decision made in the kind of silence that only comes from knowing the damage has already been done. But Sonia wasn't just going to carry that damage alone. 3 men, 3 separate encounters, and one piece of knowledge that they would never be able to erase. The truth was coming for them, and it would arrive in the most unexpected way, a way that no one saw coming. Some would say she was justified. Others would say she went too far. But no matter which side you're on, one thing is certain. What happened inside that? School would change lives forever. And once the truth came out, there was no turning back. Sonia grew up in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew each other's names, where people waved from their porches in the evenings, and where parents sent their kids to school without a second thought. It wasn't a place where scandals happened, not the kind that made headlines, not the kind that left a permanent stain on a town's reputation. But things like this don't start with headlines. They start with whispers. Her family was like many others in the community, hardworking, ordinary. Her father spent long hours at a factory just outside of town. Her mother worked part-time at a grocery store and spent the rest of her time at home, making sure Sonia and her younger brother had everything they needed. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. Sonia never had to worry about where her next meal was coming from. But money wasn't the only thing a child needed. And what she needed most, the one thing no one seemed to notice, was slipping through the cracks. She was the kind of student teachers appreciated. Quiet, respectful, never one to cause trouble. She turned in her assignments on time, kept her head down, and did what was expected of her. She wasn't the most outgoing, but she had friends. She had a future. A college acceptance letter was supposed to be in her hands within a year. She had dreams, ambitions. At least that's what everyone believed. But Sonia had learned from a young age how to wear a mask. She knew how to smile just enough to keep questions at bay, how to pretend everything was fine even when it wasn't, how to keep secrets locked so tightly inside her that even she sometimes forgot they were there. And that mask, it worked until it didn't. Her teachers saw her as a model student, but some of them noticed a shift. It was small at first, something they brushed off, a missed homework assignment here, a decline in participation there. But then it became harder to ignore. She had always been quiet, but now she seemed withdrawn. Her eyes, once sharp with focus, started to look distant. She used to sit in the front of the classroom. Now she lingered in the back. She stopped staying after class to ask questions. She stopped raising her hand. The girl who once cared about every single grade now seemed indifferent, and when a teacher would call on her, she would hesitate, her voice barely above a whisper. Students noticed it, too. The way she stopped eating lunch with the same group of friends, the way she walked through the hallways like she was carrying something heavy. They asked if she was okay. She always said yes, always. Because what else was she supposed to say? Maybe someone should have pushed harder. Maybe someone should have pulled her aside and told her they knew something was wrong. But no one did. Because no one ever thinks these things happen in their town, in their school. No one ever thinks it will be their students, their teachers, until it is. And Sonia? She had stopped waiting for someone to notice, because by then it was already too late. The faculty at Willow Creek High was known for its dedication. Teachers who had spent years shaping the future of the town's children. Men and women who attended football games on Friday nights, who chaperoned school dances, who spent hours after school helping students who needed just a little extra guidance. Among them were three men, three teachers who, by all accounts, had earned the trust of parents, students, and the community. None of them had criminal records. There were no reports of inappropriate behavior, no rumors that floated through the halls before this. They were respected. They had families, homes, stable lives. If you asked the parents, they would have said they were lucky to have them teaching at the school. If you asked the students, most would say they liked them. But if you asked Sonia, the answer might have been very different. It started, as these things often do, with something small. A single moment that seemed harmless at the time, a shift so subtle that no one saw it coming. Mr. Daniels had been teaching at Willow Creek for almost 10 years. He was the kind of teacher who went the extra mile, the one who never turned a student away if they needed help. He stayed after school, tutored those who were falling behind, and made sure every student had a chance to succeed. He was well-liked, trusted. He wasn't someone anyone would have suspected, and maybe that's why no one ever questioned it. Sonia's grades had started slipping, not dramatically, but enough to raise concern. She had always been a strong student, especially in his class. So when she stopped turning in assignments, when she avoided eye contact, when she barely spoke, he noticed. And one afternoon, he asked her to stay after class. No one thought anything of it. Students stayed behind all the time for tutoring. Teachers stayed late grading papers. It was normal, harmless. But this wasn't tutoring, not really. At first, it was just help with coursework, going over missed lessons, reviewing assignments. But something was different. The way he spoke to her, the way his voice softened when no one else was around, the way his eyes lingered just a little too long when she looked away. He told her she was smart, that she had potential, that she reminded him of himself at that age. Maybe she believed it, maybe she wanted to, because when he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and said she could always talk to him, she didn't pull away. These things don't happen all at once. It's gradual, a conversation that lingers a little too long, a hand that stays a little too close, the moment where comfort crosses the line into something else entirely. And then one night, she stayed later than usual. That was the night it happened, the night everything changed. And after that, Sonia didn't just stay late for tutoring, she stayed because she felt like she had to. Because when a teacher tells you you're special, when they make you feel like you're the exception, like you're different, it's hard to say no. And she didn't, not to him, and soon not to the others either. Mr. Lewis was the head coach of the track team. He was younger than most of the other teachers, more relaxed, more approachable. Students liked him because he didn't act like the others. He wasn't strict, he wasn't intimidating. He was easy to talk to, too easy. Sonia wasn't on the track team. She wasn't an athlete. She barely even attended the school sporting events. But suddenly she was in the gym after hours, sitting in the stands while the last runners finished their laps. Watching as Mr. Lewis lingered after practice, stretching with the athletes, making jokes, waiting for the others to leave. And when they did, Sonia stayed behind. He was different from Mr. Daniels. He wasn't careful. He wasn't subtle. He knew what he wanted and he didn't wait. He sent messages when he knew she'd be alone. He made sure she understood that what they had was a secret that, if anyone found out, would ruin them both. But secrets like this, They don't stay hidden forever. Mr. Carter was different. He had been at the school for nearly 2 decades. A veteran teacher, a department head, someone who had seen generations of students pass through his classroom. He wasn't reckless like Mr. Lewis. He wasn't emotionally invested like Mr. Daniels. He was careful, precise, and when he noticed Sonia, he didn't rush, he waited. She had already learned how to keep secrets. By the time Mr. Carter entered her life, she knew what to say, how to act. He didn't have to convince her. She was already convinced, and maybe that was the most dangerous part of all. One by one, they became entangled with her. 3 men, 3 teachers, 3 separate secrets, all leading to the same inevitable ending. The question was, did Sonia seek them out, or had they been watching her all along? Some will say she was manipulated, that she was vulnerable, that they took advantage of her. Others will say she knew exactly what she was doing, that she wanted control, that she found power in the one thing no one could take from her. But there's one thing no one can deny. What happened next was not an accident. Because Sonia had learned one thing above all else. Power was something you either take or have taken from you. And this time, she wasn't going to be the one left behind. Sonia had always been careful, at least as careful as a 17-year-old could be. She had learned over time how to compartmentalize, how to keep her school life separate from the things she did after hours, how to wake up every morning, walk into that same building, and sit in those same classrooms without letting any of it show on her face. To the outside world, nothing had changed. She was still the quiet, bright student teachers liked, the girl who faded into the background when she wanted to. And she thought she could keep it that way, until the day she went to the clinic. She hadn't planned on going. It was routine, a school health program offering free checkups, standard screenings. Nothing to worry about, something she could do quickly before heading back to class. She had done it before. It was supposed to be simple. But what happened inside that clinic wasn't simple. Not for her, not for anyone. There are moments in life that you never forget, the ones that change everything, the ones where the air in the room feels heavier, where time slows down. This was one of those moments. When the doctor sat across from her, when they took a breath before speaking, Sonia already knew, instinctively, that something was wrong. And then, they said it. She was HIV positive. At first, she didn't speak, didn't react. Just sat there numb as the doctor continued explaining the window of exposure, treatment options, support groups. But Sonia wasn't listening anymore, because there was one thing that didn't make sense, one thing that no doctor in that room could explain. The timeline didn't add up. She had never been with anyone outside of those teachers. Not before. Not outside of school. There was no one else. One of them had given it to her. But which one? She thought about Mr. Daniels, the one who had been there first, the one who had convinced her she was special, the one who made her believe she was safe. She thought about Mr. Lewis, the one who was reckless, the one who made her feel like a secret, but not the only one. And she thought about Mr. Carter, the one who never took risks, who never let things slip, the one who was always in control. 3 men, 3 possibilities, and one truth that none of them had admitted to her. She had trusted them, and now one of them had taken something from her that she could never get back. She could have walked away, told someone, reported it. There were 100 different things she could have done. Instead, she made a decision, one that no one expected. She continued seeing them. Secrets can last for days, weeks, even years, but they don't last forever. Not when they're built on something as fragile as deception. Not when the truth has a way of creeping in, slow and unyielding, until there's no room left to hide. For months, Sonia had played her part flawlessly. She continued meeting them, continued pretending everything was the same. She sent the same text messages, held the same conversations, followed the same routine. But she knew what they didn't, and she waited. And then it started. Mr. Daniels was the first. It began with fatigue, something he chalked up to stress. Late nights grading, the pressure of another school year coming to an end. He felt off, but not enough to worry. Not yet. Then came the fevers, the weight loss, the sudden, unexplained exhaustion that left him leaning against his desk in between classes. His colleagues noticed, his students noticed, but the real warning came when he stood in front of a mirror one morning and saw something staring back at him that he couldn't ignore. Pale, hollow eyes, the weight of something he couldn't name, pressing against his ribs like a hand he couldn't shake off. The doctor's visit was supposed to be routine. Blood work, a physical, a quick checkup before the school year ended. But the results? They weren't routine. HIV, a diagnosis he never expected. A word that felt foreign in his mouth, impossible in his reality. It didn't make sense, until it did. Because in that moment, a single thought lodged itself into his mind. A thought that made his hands shake, his stomach twist. Sonia, and if he was sick, what about the others? It didn't take long for the rumors to start. A teacher, ill, missing days of work. Another one looking paler than usual, leaving early. It was a private matter, or at least that's what people told themselves. But privacy doesn't last in a place like this. Not when the truth was clawing its way to the surface. It started quietly, a few whispered conversations behind closed doors, a name repeated just enough times to feel like an accusation. Then, the school board got involved. Then, the police. And when the second teacher, Mr. Lewis, tested positive, what had once been a suspicion became something else entirely. Evidence. Mr. Carter was the last to be tested. By then, he already knew what the results would be. He didn't need a doctor to tell him. He felt it in his bones, in the pit of his stomach. And when his results came back, confirming what he had already begun to fear, the silence inside that school turned into something suffocating. Heavy, deadly. 3 men, 3 teachers, 3 positive results. There was only one connection between them. Sonia never flinched. She never looked over her shoulder. She kept walking, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Because the truth was, she had. She didn't deny it, not a single part of it. The officers barely had to ask the question before she gave them the answer. Yes, she had been involved with them. Yes, she had known about her diagnosis. Yes, she had continued seeing them. And no, she didn't regret it. The footage exists, a recorded police interview preserved in the case file. And what stands out the most isn't what she said, it's how she said it. There was no panic in her voice, no tears, no anger. She answered every question with the kind of calm that left the officers uneasy, as if she had rehearsed it, as if she had been waiting for this day. When asked why she did it, her response was simple. Because they deserved it. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, just certainty. The teachers were arrested. First, charged with sexual misconduct, abuse of power, corruption of a minor. The community was outraged. Parents demanded answers. Students whispered about the girl who had brought down 3 men in a single night. Some called her brave. Others called her dangerous. But Sonia? Sonia walked free. She wasn't arrested, not yet, because the law wasn't written for cases like this. The men were criminals. That was clear. But Sonia was something else entirely. Something the law didn't know how to define. And while the world debated whether she was a victim or a villain, she was already one step ahead. Because the truth is, Sonia never needed the law to be on her side. She had already won. The courtroom was silent, a silence so thick it pressed against the walls, against the people sitting in the wooden benches, against the 3 men who sat at the defense table, their suits too crisp, their faces unreadable. They had been teachers, respected, trusted. Now they were defendants, their futures in the hands of 12 strangers, and just feet away, sitting across from them, was the girl who had put them there. Sonia sat with her back straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. She did not fidget. She did not cry. She did not turn to look at them, because she already knew how this would end. She had known from the moment she walked into that police station, from the moment she uttered the words that sealed their fate. Because they deserved it, Sonia's lawyers argued what many had already begun to believe, that she was a victim, a child preyed upon by 3 men in positions of power. She had been manipulated, groomed, controlled. And when she learned the truth, when she realized that her trust had been not only broken, but weaponized against her, she did what she thought was the only thing left to do. She took justice into her own hands. Was it wrong? Her lawyer asked the jury. Yes, but tell me, was it justice? The prosecution saw it differently. They painted a different picture, not of a victim, but of a girl who had made a choice, one that had consequences. They argued that Sonia had not only hidden her diagnosis, but had done so with intent. She had used her knowledge as a weapon. She had infected 3 men, not in a moment of rage, not as an accident, but methodically, and that made it a crime. She didn't just want revenge, the prosecutor said. She wanted them to suffer. And they did. Her face, long enough for another story to take its place in the headlines. Some said it was fair, others said it wasn't enough. And Sonia? She never said a word. The trial ended, the headlines faded, the town moved on, but the questions never did. Was Sonia a victim? Or had she become something else? Were the teachers the only ones responsible? Or had the system failed them all? And when she walked out of that facility years later, who would she be then? Because Sonia was gone, but she wasn't forgotten. And what she left behind wasn't just a crime. It was a story, one that people would tell for years to come. Was justice served? Was she a victim or a villain? Let us know in the comments below. Justice is a word that people like to believe in. It's what keeps order, what separates right from wrong. But in cases like this, where morality and revenge blur into something unrecognizable, justice isn't always so simple. 3 men broke the law, they were punished. The girl who exposed them, she was punished too. And now the town that once prided itself on being safe, respectable, and predictable had become something else entirely. Something divided, something broken. No one wanted to talk about it anymore. Not out loud. The case was closed, the verdict delivered. But even after the trials ended, after the courtrooms emptied, after the last headline faded from the news cycle, people still whispered about Sonia. They whispered about the girl who turned the tables, the girl who refused to be another statistic, the girl who became something else entirely. Willow Creek was never the same after that. Teachers resigned. Parents pulled their children from school, afraid of what else might be lurking in the places they had once trusted. The whispers never stopped, and neither did the questions. How had no one noticed? How had this gone on for so long? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, how many other Sonias were out there? Girls who never spoke up? Girls who never got their revenge? She wasn't the only one, a former student admitted. There were rumors, we all heard them, but nobody ever did anything. Now, it was too late. They shut the school down a year later. The funding was pulled, the students relocated. No one wanted to be associated with it anymore. Parents didn't want their kids walking the same hallways where it happened. Teachers didn't want to teach in classrooms stained with a scandal that refused to fade. What was once a place for learning was now just another forgotten structure, another ghost of the past that people wished they could erase. 3 men sat in 3 different prison cells, each one with their own version of what had happened. Each one telling themselves that the blame wasn't entirely theirs, that they hadn't been the only ones responsible. They would serve their time, some longer than others, some refusing to speak about what had happened, others still maintaining their innocence. She knew what she was doing, he says. She wanted to ruin us, and she did. Sonia spent her years inside quietly. She didn't fight. She didn't cry. She didn't even try to appeal her sentence. She simply waited, the way she had always waited. She was released at 21. No cameras, no reporters. Just a quiet exit from the facility, walking out into a world that had already moved on without her. No one knows where she went after that. Some say she changed her name, started fresh somewhere far away. Others say she's still out there, living under the same name, unafraid of the story that once made her infamous. But wherever she went, one thing was certain. Sonia had done what she set out to do. She had torn down the men who had used her. She had taken away their power. She had become the one thing no one ever expected her to be. Justice had been served, or had it. A girl who refused to stay a victim, 3 men who lost everything, a town left to pick up the pieces. But justice is a fragile thing, bending under the weight of human emotion. And in this case, it left behind a question that no one could seem to answer. Was Sonia a victim? Was she a criminal? Or was she something else entirely? Was justice served? Was she a victim or a villain? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more true crime stories that make you question everything, subscribe now.